Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Kristin Phillips-Hill, and today I'm sitting down with someone who has become an incredibly valuable partner in our efforts to make Pennsylvania more competitive, not just for job creators, but also for working families. So joining me today is Mr. Alex Halper. He is Vice President of Government Affairs with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Senator, thanks very much for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Well, we recently launched the Pennsylvania Competitiveness Caucus, a bipartisan, bicameral group of lawmakers from all across the Commonwealth, people who are committed to improving our state's long-term economic outlook. And from your perspective at the Pennsylvania Chamber, why is this kind of effort so timely and so necessary?
Well, thank you, Senator. We are incredibly excited about this group coming together, you serving as one of the four co-chairs. As you mentioned, this is bicameral, so we have members of the PA House, members of the PA Senate, and bipartisan, so Republicans and Democrats. When you talk to lawmakers, many have very close connections with their local employers. They care deeply about their local economies and the Pennsylvania economy, and are working in the legislature to create a business climate in Pennsylvania that encourages growth, encourages business attraction. So for you to join with your other co-chairs and to create this caucus where you can focus on competitiveness and what are those policies that will really allow Pennsylvania to live up to its immense potential is just incredibly exciting. And as you noted, now is the time when we really need to be pushing for these policies, and we're just excited how it's come together so far.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I have often said that we may have divided government, we can't have dysfunctional government, and we need to create an environment here in Pennsylvania where everyone can grow and thrive. Because I can tell you that I hear all the time, especially from small business owners and local employers in York County, and they say, we want to grow, right? We want to invest here, but they feel like they're being held back by outdated policies or bureaucratic government red tape. So we need to be competitive, not just with neighboring states. We talk a lot about Ohio and New York, but we have to compete nationally. We have to compete globally, and I think we're capable of doing just that. So what are some of the top concerns that you're hearing from businesses that are chamber members when it comes to Pennsylvania's economic climate?
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania's economy and our business community is incredibly diverse. I really think that's one of the strengths of the Commonwealth is the diversity of our economy. But there are absolutely certain themes that we hear from employers when we ask them, what are those things that are holding you back? What could state government do to encourage your growth? And it is things like regulatory overregulation, and within that area, things like permitting. If you want to grow or expand or build a new wing onto your facility, I mean, first of all, that's incredible if you're in that position. If you're a business that has not only become profitable, but is able to hire people and bring in more equipment and actually wants to grow, that needs to be celebrated, and that should be met from state government with the same level of enthusiasm, which means working in a cooperative, collaborative way to allow those types of projects to happen. And of course, consistent with all environmental requirements of all regulations, but it should happen in a way that is most conducive for that company to kind of fulfill what they're looking to do. So regulation and permitting is part of that. Workforce, we still hear from a lot of employers who have open positions, but not the people to fill them. And that's an area where where we really need to grow that workforce, grow that pool of applicants to fill open positions in Pennsylvania.
Well, I think that aligns with a lot of the feedback that I've certainly received, especially on issues like regulatory bottlenecks and workforce shortages. And I've said it before, we cannot afford to be a wait and see state while other states are sprinting ahead of us with pro growth economic reforms. I think one of the best things about the caucus is that collaboration across party lines, across chambers, and with outside partners like the Chamber of Business and Industry. We recently held a roundtable with business and community leaders at the Utz chip factory in Hanover. I know you were there. We had folks from all over the Commonwealth and a lot of business owners in the district. And I think it was really insightful, especially for my colleagues from outside of South Central Pennsylvania, to be able to hear their concerns. You know, it's one thing for Kristin to come up here and say, this is what my people are saying. And they're like, okay, okay, okay. But then for them to hear it straight from the mouths of my employers, my workers, big businesses and small businesses in the community. I had a few colleagues who said, wow, I know I've heard you say this, but wow, it's really true. This is incredible. It's insane. And I'm thinking, guys, I'm not making this stuff up, right? But hearing those concerns that I've been trying to share statewide, right from the very people, it was so powerful. So what kind of role do you see the business community playing in helping to shape our policy priorities and objectives?
Well, I think you're exactly correct, Senator. We can be, and I know you throughout your career have been one of our great champions for the business community in Pennsylvania's economy. Certainly from the PA Chamber, our day-to-day is advocating on behalf of employers. But there is something different about hearing it directly from a business, directly from a business owner, whether it's a small business or a larger corporation, really trying to grow and hire people and improve Pennsylvania's economy. When you're hearing directly from them, describing some of these challenges and some of the kind of backwards ways that they end up having to interact with state government, I think it really does drive the point and sort of makes it clear to other advocates, to lawmakers, that there's got to be a better way. I also have found through some of these meetings and the roundtable that you hosted that the feedback that we get from employers is also kind of enlightening. They are really also excited to see a group of lawmakers from different parts of the state, from both sides of the aisle, from the House and the Senate, coming together to ask them, what can we do as lawmakers to make it not just easier to run a business, but to really support your efforts to grow. Unfortunately, a lot of what a lot of what the public hears from politics, whether it's here in Harrisburg or down in D.C., are those kind of handful of more divisive issues that come up where it ends up being a lot of headbutting. But the reality is, and I think a lot of the priorities that you as the caucus co-chairs have identified, these are not partisan issues. These are not these are priorities that are really bringing people together, whether it's improving permitting or improving our tax climate or trying to get more people to work. So while I completely agree that I think a lot of lawmakers are sort of, the light bulb goes off a little bit when you hear from a real business, I was almost as excited to see businesses amazed at this bipartisan, bicameral group of lawmakers coming together to try to advance a good strong agenda.
I completely agree with you, and I think that one of the things that's so important to remember, especially when we're talking about regulatory reform and permitting reform. I tell people, they say, oh, this is just a business issue. It's really not. Business feels it. It has a great economic impact on them. It impacts people's jobs. But this impacts nonprofit organizations. I once had a YMCA that was really struggling to find lifeguards because if the lifeguard of that pool was going to be attending where children who are in childcare are going, they needed additional levels of certification, which precluded them from being able to find lifeguards. And they were on the verge of shutting down a pool, right? So this is a nonprofit organization in the community that does a great deal of work that's very valued by the community, by families. Where does your child go to be safe during the summer? YMCA.
Yeah.
And they were really struggling to keep the pool open. Great exercise, wonderful life skill. We know it's one of the leading causes of accidental death for children, drowning. So being able to be monitored, learn how to swim, you need a lifeguard. But the state was putting a barrier between that nonprofit organization and those lifeguards. I talk about municipalities. I had a municipality that wanted to put up a salt shed and they couldn't get a state permit. And so, it's that little elderly couple that needs to sell their home because they need to go into a care facility. So this really impacts not just business. It's nonprofits, it's local governments, it's individuals. And while we've seen the business community really spearhead this, I think it could have a positive impact for so many people in our communities.
It is interesting, Senator, how so many of these challenging areas are intertwined. So we hear from around the state, and I think it's a national issue over childcare and having access to childcare and encouraging childcare centers to open because there are not enough open slots. You talk to some of the providers, and they deal with regulatory and permitting challenges as well. We also hear in different communities that there's a lack of housing stock. Our employers tell us they're trying to recruit people, but applicants can't find affordable or housing within their budgets. So you talk to some of the housing advocates, and they talk about permitting choke points and challenges with permitting for different types of housing development. I really believe that there is a consensus within the legislature, the administration, that there's a better way to there's just a better way to do things, that we can at the same time pursue environmental and community and zoning concerns, but also have systems that support growth, and for those employers looking to build or expand, that there's a way to do it better. But the way it all is sort of intertwined, it's just interesting sometimes to see it happen from the outside.
Indeed. And politics, they say, can sometimes make for strange bedfellows. and we're seeing this now.
Yes.
With these regulatory issues. And I think, that input is really valuable because I think one of the things we have to stay away from is a one-size-fits-all policy making. And that's when we tend to see more of this heavy-handed overregulation creep into what we're doing. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we do in Harrisburg is going to actually work on the ground, right? We want to drink clean water. We want to breathe clean air. How can we create a regulatory structure that ensures those things, but isn't overly burdensome? And those are the kinds of things that working together, I think, that we can do. But you also talked about workforce development. So let's talk about workforce development just for a moment. I think this is something that I really have come to care very deeply about, and that's making sure that Pennsylvanians have meaningful careers without having to leave Pennsylvania. Too many of our children are finding their greatest economic opportunity in Florida, Texas, Tennessee, not right here in the Commonwealth. How can we make sure that our policies that are in place can support that goal? How can we make sure that our kids get the skills that are needed to have good family-sustaining wage jobs in Pennsylvania?
Senator, I think it's, not to over exaggerate, but I think it's sort of the defining challenge of our time right now is how do we attract people to Pennsylvania? How do we keep people in Pennsylvania? As a lifelong Pennsylvanian myself, it's so important. And I've got two younger kids, and my dream for them, of course, is to be happy and have fulfilling lives and careers. I would love for it to be in Pennsylvania, though. So how can we make that happen? And related to that, how do we have kind of systems in place so that younger Pennsylvanians do get the education and the training so that they are prepared for careers in the future? And how do we have those careers here in Pennsylvania so at the end of the day, for each individual family, it can all come together? It's not easy. There are a lot of headwinds that we deal with from a workforce and education perspective. I think a lot of it falls on the business community. There is a point where there's only so much that lawmakers can do. I think your caucus and you as a senator, it's wanting to solve problems, and you're so great at it. But we also need, as a business community, to really step up. So when high schools or middle schools reach out to their business community to come to career fairs or to come speak to their students and even help to develop some of the curriculum so that children are learning the types of skills and getting exposure to the types of industries where there will be career opportunities in the future. Employers have to answer those calls when they come to them. We see some wonderful examples around the state of businesses answering those calls, but it needs to be, I think, much more widespread. We did a survey a number of years ago where we asked employers about what type of career training and job training or interactions with schools and internships, like what are you doing? And then we separately asked these businesses, to what extent are you experiencing workforce challenges? We then kind of combined the data, and we found that those businesses that are more engaged with their communities and their schools have fewer workforce challenges. So even if you're only looking at it from your own kind of parochial perspective, it is still a smart business decision to get involved. So there's a lot that can happen, a lot that should be happening, but if it's for the goal of getting Pennsylvania's children prepared and hopefully for good careers in Pennsylvania, it needs to be all hands on deck.
You raise a really good point. In York County, there's something called the York County Alliance for Learning, and it connects educators to employers so that they can teach children about those jobs. And to listen to those educators who participate in that. A physics teacher that goes and works for a local engineering firm, a high school biology teacher who goes and works in the phlebotomy lab at the local hospital. And to hear the educators talk about, wow, I didn't know those jobs existed today, because the workplace evolves very quickly. Jobs change and evolve dramatically. I have a son who majored in something that didn't exist when he was born. So it's constantly growing and evolving and changing. And when an educator can share that information with a student in the classroom, it can be really powerful and help them find a passion and their future success. So it all really comes down to opportunity, creating that environment where people want to live, where people want to work, where people want to stay. And key to that is getting the people the training that they need to be successful in the workplace.
But and it all kind of works together because as we talked about before, as we're training the next generation of great Pennsylvania leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners and skilled workforce, we also need a business climate that will have the jobs, that will have the growth potential, and the kind of entrepreneurial spirit to encourage startups to come to Pennsylvania or stay in Pennsylvania. The legislature and your caucus really took the lead last year on improving the treatment of net operating losses in our tax code. And that's kind of
It sounds wonky,
a wonky
right?
tax
So
issue.
what does,
But
if the average person is driving on Interstate 83, listening to this podcast, what does that really mean for them?
well, I want them to be totally focused on the road first of all. But nothing gets you excited like talking about good tax policy. So net operating losses. This is a tax practice that is pretty standard in all 50 states and the federal tax code. The idea is that a lot of businesses, especially startups, or I should say tech startups, are losing money when they first form. They're investing in people. They're investing in capital. They're trying to get their businesses up and running. So they actually don't make a profit. In many cases, they are losing money. The net operating loss is this system where for those businesses, when they eventually, we hope, turn the corner and start making a profit, they can actually use some of those losses in previous years to reduce their tax burden once they finally do start making a profit. The idea is, those companies that are finally profitable, they might be just teetering on the edge. We want them to have the capital to continue investing, continue growing, because so often that's not the case. They're not able to survive. Pennsylvania, for many years, had one of the lowest caps in the country on how much of your profit could be offset by those previous losses. Finally, through your hard work and your colleagues, we are on a path to increasing that cap to at least be on par with the federal tax code and most of the other states in the country. So yes, a very wonky tax issue, but if you're a startup or if you're I'm sure your podcast is popular with high school students. If you want to be a tech entrepreneur someday, this is a policy that lets you keep more of your money and grow your business. Pennsylvania's got so much going for it in so many different ways. And this is one example where if we have a business climate that is even just average, I think we're going to win and I think we're going to thrive. Now, if we have a business climate that is leading the country, then the sky is the limit, no doubt.
Well, every year in the fall, we do a Senator for the Day program, and we bring high school students up from across the 28th Senatorial District, and I am always so encouraged, so heartened to spend time with these young people. We've got a lot of really bright young people who have a lot of opportunity ahead of them. If we get the playing field, the economic environment right for them, I think they can do really good things right here in Pennsylvania. So I'm optimistic that if we continue to focus on smart, forward-thinking reforms, things like improving workforce development, getting the tax code right, getting the regulatory environment right, fixing the permitting system, we can change the trajectory of the economy for the betterment of every Pennsylvanian. And our kids' greatest opportunity will be here, not anywhere else. What are your thoughts?
Senator, I could not agree more, and it's one of the things that also makes me optimistic and excited about the future. We do have in Pennsylvania certain advantages, natural advantages that any other state or most states in the country would do anything for. Our geographic location, our waterways and ports, our great institutions of higher education. We have all of these components.
And don't forget our energy.
And our energy, thank you, probably top of the list. And
Yeah.
you've seen some of the announcements over the last few weeks and few months from Homer City to Amazon with several announcements and down the line. I mean, they're here because of our energy resources. So these natural resources, if paired with public policy and creating a business climate that complements those natural advantages, the optimism should be just through the roof. And if I'm a high schooler in Pennsylvania, going to your Senator for a Day event, I hope I'm optimistic about my career prospects if I want to stay here in the Commonwealth.
Well, Alex, before we close, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, whether they're business owners, workers, students, any Pennsylvanian who cares about where this Commonwealth is headed?
I think, and first, Senator, I really appreciate the invitation to be with you today. But I think the kind of optimism that you're not only talking about but really promote, and the optimism that is infused in the Pennsylvania Competitiveness Caucus that you're co-chairing, should really be exciting for all those groups you just mentioned, whether it's business owners or students or residents of the district. Again, we hear so much in politics, it's exhausting, some of the headbutting and things going on in D.C. and elsewhere. But to see the kind of work that you're doing with your colleagues, Republicans, Democrats, across the board, it's really exciting. So I would simply encourage anyone to, when you have an opportunity to get involved, to advocate, go for it. And if you're an employer, in your county, whether you know it or not, you got great champions like Senator Phillips-Hill here in Harrisburg, who's got your back and trying to make Pennsylvania a state where you can thrive. So I'm optimistic, Senator.
I share your optimism. Thank you, Alex, for taking the time to be part of this conversation and really for all that you are doing to help move Pennsylvania forward. So where can our listeners find out more about you and what the Pennsylvania Chamber is doing?
Well, we've got a website, pachamber.org. I know we're pretty active on social media. I've got some very hilarious and creative colleagues over at the PA Chamber who do some fun stuff on social media. But yeah, we're at all that stuff.
All right. So pachamber.org,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
check them out on social media. I think one of my favorite things that you do is during March Madness, but instead of basketball teams competing, you have Pennsylvania businesses competing.
Yes, our coolest thing made in
Coolest
PA,
thing made in
bracket
PA.
style competition. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And we make a lot of things in York County, and we're very proud of it.
Indeed.
So thank you again, Alex. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Today's guest was Alex Halper from the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to visit my website at senatorkristin.com. This is Kristin Phillips-Hill signing off, and we're going to look forward to talking again soon.